All of a sudden, the Arizona Cardinals have one of the most, if not the most, interesting quarterback situations in the NFL. We got all of that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering the biggest stories around the National Football League. Here is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. And a big shout out to all you everydayers out there. It's Tuesday, which means you've got myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on the app formerly known as Prince, joined this week by David Harrison at DHarrison82, wherever you get your social media. We appreciate you being here with us for another episode of Locked On NFL. Today's episode of Locked On NFL brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Sign up today, download the app, and use the promo code Locked On NFL, and you're going to get $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. David, I'm excited about today's episode. We're going to jump into our Yike and Like to wrap it up. As always, we're going to take a look at the rookie quarterback with the best starting situation. But first, that Arizona Cardinals quarterback situation. So I don't want to spend too much time setting this up, David, because I want to get to you on this. But let's start off with the first and kind of biggest piece of this. Kyler Murray going to the physically unable to perform list. Hasn't really been a part of training camp, stuff like that. Going to be out for at least the first 4 weeks. How does this impact the Arizona Cardinals first, let's say first quarter of the schedule, but really kind of the trajectory of their 2023?
Right. I mean, it impacts it greatly. And this is a team that's not expected to do great things in the NFL this year, right? Like they're expected to be in competition for one of the top 2 draft picks in the NFL. The other team I think that's expected to be really down there with them, the Los Angeles Rams. So both teams coming out of the NFC West, like this isn't a team that's supposed to be good. And that's even going back to like the end of last season with like the way too early projections and all that stuff, when maybe Kyler Murray with like a miracle recovery might be able to come back and all these other things. Like even with Kyler, without Kyler, doesn't matter. Nobody's expecting a lot from the Arizona Cardinals. But when you look at Kyler Murray's situation, like this is a guy who the last 12 to 16 months reputation wise have not been good for him. And then his coach gets fired, and I don't think one coach gives you the coach killer, tag, and not fairly anyway. It shouldn't, right? Yeah. But the way that everything kind of transpired, obviously the leaking of the contract information and then the rescinding of the contract demands and all these other things, like just a bad look all around from an organization for a quarterback. And then you've got the other parts. And I've unfortunately, or fortunately maybe for this conversation, have had to witness firsthand how sometimes players can kind of get sucked into the mud of what the organization is going through. And when you're a player that has their own noise going on around them, like Kyler did and does, that it's an easy thing for people to just sling the mud for going from the organization as well. You may have nothing to do with what's going on with the general manager, but because you want to play video games, that just gets attached to your name anyway. Again, fair or not. So he needs a good start. The team needs a good start. And by the time we get to the end of 2023, again, fair or not, like if the Cardinals are picking first or second in the NFL draft, a lot of people are going to look at the Kyler Murray contract and situation and say, this is one of the reasons why you are. But in reality, Kyler is almost kind of a victim in this whole thing himself, with the injury. I mean, you can't control injuries. So.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, look, the first 4 games of their schedule, they go up against Washington Commanders. They have the New York Giants at home. They host the Dallas Cowboys, and then they go on the road for their first division game going up against the San Francisco 49ers in what will be an afternoon game. I mean, these are not the easiest teams to go up against. Each one of these teams has some level of momentum going in their favor. And so, a potential... Like, look, I don't want to sit here and just like trash the Cardinals or anything like that. So when I say a potential 0-4 start, what I mean is if it was to get off to an 0-4 start, even if you show up as in the 5th week to kick everything off and to be ready to go, you got the Cincinnati Bengals coming to town. And then the very next week you're on the road to Los Angeles Rams, maybe some reprieve there, but it's a tough schedule for the Arizona Cardinals. And then now to lose the most important player at the most important position on the field for at least the first 4 games of the season, that seems, I mean, that's going to be detrimental for the beginning of your season so far. During the course of those first four games, along with him going to Kyler Murray going to physically unable to perform list, which, by the way, the designation of physically unable to perform just means that basically there is a football injury or something that happened during an NFL game that has kept him away from participating in anything during the offseason thus far. And now he's going to start on what's called the reserve PUP list, which is what kind of brings you into the beginning of the season. So he'll miss at least those first four games. He could miss more than that, however. So we'll see how that goes. But in the meanwhile, they also moved on from Colt McCoy, a guy that I know, a lot of people kind of expected, like, if something like this were to happen, that maybe Colt McCoy would be the starter. But now the conversation looks to be between the newly acquired Joshua Dobbs, who was just recently traded the Arizona Cardinals from the Cleveland Browns, and Clayton Tune, the young quarterback. And so, this gets even more challenging, right? Do you go with Clayton Tune, who has shown some promise, or do you go with Joshua Dobbs, who has played at the NFL level? And I think that really all comes down to, like, what do you as an organization, if you're the Arizona Cardinals, really want to achieve here, right? I see the value in getting a look at the young guy, but would you rather go with the NFL veteran who might be able to win you some games in that time?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that, every year there's a handful of teams that go through this conversation of being in an identity crisis, right? And they need to find what their identity is going to be. And you have a new head coach in Arizona who's got to really reestablish the atmosphere there. And like you said, what is our environment going to be? Who are we as the Arizona Cardinals? Are we a team that really is starting way behind the eight ball, and we're going to scratch and claw for every little thing that we get? And really, this is I don't even want to call it a rebuild, but more of a building project. Or are we a team that's going to come out here and be the scrappy out, right? Because if you look at it, without Kyler Murray, like, I'll be honest with you, we've been talking about the Arizona Cardinals for the last month and a half on the Washington Commanders beat. Not on our shows and in our articles, but just on the sideline every once in a while. It comes up week one. You can't lose that game. If you're the Washington Commanders, you cannot lose to the Arizona Cardinals week one. And that was with Colt McCoy. Now you got Joshua Dobbs, who I know he's got experience with this offensive coordinator. He's got experience with this offense in a way, his old quarterbacks coach is there, but that's not the exact same. Like, it's not like you're running a scheme you've already ran. Like, those schemes are not going to be copy paste from all that experience and all that travel. So there's still that complication. Then Clayton Tune, like you said, some promise in preseason, but still the young quarterback. And now you have the 13th ranked defense from last year looking to get better, be a top 10, top 8, top 5 defense this year. Not only, like, if you're the Washington Commanders, you're almost in a situation where not only can you not lose to the Cardinals, you almost can't let them score a touchdown. Like, anything more than 6 points in this game is going to be looked at almost as a failure. But on the other side of that, the Arizona Cardinals come into that game, and let's be honest, a lot of these other games with nothing to lose. Like, we walk into this game with people saying, oh, it's the Arizona Cardinals. Good luck with your number 1 overall pick in April. Thanks for stopping by. But you're App State going into the big house. You know what I mean? You're App State against Michigan. Yeah. Nobody counts you. Nobody counts on you. Nobody thinks you have anything to offer. So that's the perfect time. Like, every week against the Arizona Cardinals is a trap game. The problem I see with Kyler Murray is, if, let's say, he does return in that Rams game and they win in April, your fans might be cursing your name, because that win might be why you have the number 2 overall pick instead of the number 1 overall pick. Like, so it's almost like you can't even win in that situation. But really, it almost makes the Arizona Cardinals so counted out that they're almost the most dangerous team on everybody's schedule that they're on.
Yeah, like, we can't forget that this is still an NFL football team that is capable of winning games, right? Like no matter how down in the dumps they might seem or anything like that, this is still an NFL team, and they still have the capacity to win games. I think the big question is, if you're the Arizona Cardinals, do you want to be 3-14, or do you want to be 7-10? And how does that end up impacting your future? And how does Clayton Tune factor into that? I mean, you're not getting out of Kyler Murray's contract anytime remote, like quickly, right? Like specifically soon. But what does all of that tell you too? So it's going to be really, really interesting. Obviously, if you want more on this, Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy, best place to go, because one thing that we know for sure about Alex is he's not going to sugarcoat anything. So if you want to know what's going on there, that's the place to go. Coming up next, though, we're going to take a look at some of these other rookie quarterbacks that are also going to be getting starts. I mean, we don't know about Clayton Tune just yet, but we do know about 3 other rookies, particularly drafted within the top 5, who's got the best situation ahead of them. Dave and I are going to break it down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Gametime tickets. It's the place to go when you want to grab tickets, but you don't really have, you didn't have the opportunity to really plan like months in advance and stuff like that. You and your friends are sitting around and you go, you know what? I really want to go to that Arizona Cardinals versus Washington Commanders week 1 game and see just what all the hubbub is about with both of these franchises. But you make that decision on September 9th. The game is on September 10th. Don't pay out the wazoo for all of these upcharged things and stuff like that. Go find the lowest prices that you're going to find, which you're always going to be able to find over at Gametime, because it's the best place for last minute ticket deals. And with the Gametime guarantee, it means you'll always get that best price. So if you find tickets in the same row and in the same section for less, Gametime's actually going to refund you the difference 110%. Really, really cool stuff there. And you can buy those tickets in a matter of seconds, just 2 clicks, and you're ready to attend. Snag your tickets without any stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. It's going to be terms, of course, will apply. But again, you can create an account and then redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. We know Bryce Young. We know CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans. Bryce Young, of course, of the Carolina Panthers. And Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts have all been named starters at the beginning of the season. Which one of them has the best situation ahead of them? So David and I are going to be breaking down here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. We appreciate all of you everydayers out there making us your first listen of the day every day. So, David, between Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, where do you go for the player that's most immediately set up for success in 2023?
Yeah, I think typically you would say the quarterback playing for the team that had the latest organic draft pick, right, in the NFL draft this year would be in the best situation. That would be Bryce Young, who the Carolina Panthers had to trade up to the number 1 overall pick. Right. So in theory, like, they had the better record last year, so they should be better set up to bring in a rookie quarterback. But in reality, I think, and you and I both know about this, I think that really is just a reflection of how bad the NFC South was last year, that the Carolina Panthers were able to win some games they probably had no business winning, but neither team really had any business winning during stretches of the season. But that's not the case. Like, I look at the Carolina Panthers, and I know this isn't the question. I think that's the worst situation. I think Bryce Young's in the worst situation. I think you have to go Anthony Richardson, right? Because in my mind, like, the Indianapolis Colts, outside of the dumpster fire the NFC South was last year, the Indianapolis Colts are the last of these 3 teams, had the last opportunity to make the playoffs. And we're the last team, I guess, to be playoff competitive. But then you look at the weapons too. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr., if he can stay healthy, certainly brings some things. I really like Alec Pierce. I like him coming out of Cincinnati. I think he could have a big season. Josh Downs was a guy that I was pounding the table for out of North Carolina. I mean, I cover a North Carolina quarterback in Sam Howell, and I was like, look, I know the Commanders have a lot of good receivers. Josh Downs is that dude. Like, Josh Downs is worth adding to a really stacked receiver room. So I would have loved to see that, but
which already includes another UNC wide receiver in Diami Brown,
right? Which already includes Diami Brown. Yeah, let's just change the color scheme to baby blue and call it done, right? But I think the offensive line has some questions, but I think it's fairly solid. The defense is okay. The Jonathan Taylor thing is really the biggest thing, right? If JT sticks, then I think it hands down it's Indianapolis. If JT leaves, and depending on what Indianapolis does after that, like correct me, unless he signed somewhere Monday and I wasn't catching because I was busy, Kareem Hunt is still out there somewhere, like Zach Moss, Kareem Hunt. Like, I don't know, it's not JT, but it's serviceable, maybe, you know what I mean? And then Anthony Richardson with his ability. I think Anthony Richardson, which is ironic because you go back to the draft season, it's like Anthony Richardson was like one of the most questionable quarterbacks in this process on the outside world. But I think honestly, if I had to bet money on one of these 3 guys to lead their team to the playoffs in year 1, it would be Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. I think the coaching staff too for Anthony Richardson, I mean, getting to work with a guy like Shane Steichen, seeing what he did with, Jalen Hurts and all that, like that's really exciting there too. And what it is they can introduce. I don't want to leave CJ Stroud entirely out of the conversation, but I think it's pretty clear that when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, the Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts, Houston Texans just have a little bit, they've got further to go. They've got great pieces. They have a fantastic young head coach in DeMeco Ryans. They add in Will Anderson. There's a lot of really good stuff that's happening there. Laramie Tunsil is one of the better left tackles in the entire league, all those other things. Like there's really, really good pieces there, obviously, but I think it's fair to say that they have a little bit of a ways to go. And I think you imagine the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts kind of cannibalizing each other a little bit in the conversation too, playing in the same division. I'm going to differ a little bit though. I'm going to go Bryce Young. And I think that the weak division is a big part of it for me. I mean, look, I more than just about anybody on this network know what it is that the New Orleans Saints are trying to do going into 2023, but are they going to be able to achieve it? We don't know. Are they going to stay healthy enough to achieve it? We don't know. And so with that, you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are still piecing things together and figuring out their own quarterback situation, or have figured out their own quarterback situation, but there's still an element of figuring out the quarterback situation anytime there's a new quarterback in the building, which goes for 3 of the 4 teams in that division, the Panthers and Saints included in that. And then the Atlanta Falcons have done some nice things over to the defense, but will it all translate? The Carolina Panthers have the defense, which is what I really, really like about this for Bryce Young. They have some big questions to answer on the offensive line. There's no denying that, but they've got nice weapons. I mean, adding guys like Adam Thielen, who I think we're all underrating as kind of like this older guy. I know I certainly made my jokes about it and things like that, but I love to get my jokes off. And then you've got, a Terrace Marshall over on the outside. And while that Jonathan Taylor, my apologies, question in Indianapolis is still looming, the addition of Miles Sanders in Carolina is a substantial upgrade from what they've had over the past few years at running, or not past few years, but since dealing with injuries, Christian McCaffrey, and then the eventual departure of Christian McCaffrey, right? Not better than Christian McCaffrey himself, but he hasn't been on the field as much for Carolina as they would have liked, hence the trade. I look at where Bryce Young is, and then the coaching staff that they built around him, getting a guy like Frank Reich in the building, who I like a lot, kind of upgrading their coaching staff from what Julian Council over at Locked On Panthers kind of called a collegiate coaching staff, what it was in the previous years with Matt Rule. And then now going into where it is right now, to where it kind of feels like there's a lot of grownups in the building again. Like, I do think that those things move the needle and go a long way. So I'll say I like Bryce Young being in the best situation. Now, can he bank on it? Can he turn it around? Can he turn it into wins? Can he turn the corner and be able to take advantage of that situation? Separate question entirely, but I do like where Carolina is, but certainly Anthony Richardson is not a distant second on my list at all. Yeah.
I mean, can the Carolina Panthers trade for Jonathan Taylor? I mean, let's get Bryce Young, Jonathan Taylor, Frank Reich. I mean, he knows the guy, right? I mean, can we make that happen? I think that would certainly put Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers up a notch. And I think the Buccaneers and the Saints and the Falcons would certainly have take them a little bit more serious. I mean, how do you defend that backfield? And then, you mentioned Adam Thielen. It's funny because you said you kind of got your jokes off. I was sitting here literally thinking, and for those of you who are watching on YouTube, right? I'm a Nuggets fan. Adam Thielen to the Carolina Panthers reminds me when Chauncey Billups went to Denver, and which means there's still talent there.
Yeah.
Well, let's be real. Like let's be real. Like, the best day, like Mr. Big Shot showed up every once in a while in Denver, and I love him forever for doing it. But he wasn't the same that we saw before, and I don't think Adam Thielen is going to be the same that we saw before either. The Houston Texans, though, man, like CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Why do I keep? You know what? I did that all during the offseason.
You got it right.
The Houston Texans with CJ Stroud, right? I want to talk about that because I really do like what they have building. And I think you made a very valid point. Like, how bad are they going to cannibalize each other? And then of course you have the Jacksonville Jaguars that I think everybody pretty much pegs as the top of that division. And we'll see what the Tennessee Titans are. I think every year they could be a surprise going either way, like better than we expected, worse than we expected. But I think that their new head coach hire, D'Amico Ryans, I think that team is really going to rally, or has already started rallying around him. But I think very quietly, this Houston Texans team, out of these three, and I want to make that very clear, out of these three, may have the better weapons. I mean, Dameon Pierce made Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators look like an NFL scout because Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators was trying to tell everybody about Dameon Pierce last year. I've liked Nico Collins since the Senior Bowl, and I mean, I know he hasn't all the way arrived, but I mean, the more he plays, the more he proves us right. Mm-hmm. Robert Woods, I mean, there's your Chauncey Billups, right? Noah Brown, I'm kind of but Tank Dell has done some really good things. John Mechie the third, I think that, if he's all the way healthy, that could be a situation. And I don't hate that offensive line. You know what I mean? I don't hate the offensive line.
Schultz,
Dalton Schultz is good. I mean, look, and CJ, CJ's not a running quarterback from the sense that, you know, people want to grab him on Madden and just run all over the court. But I think he showed, again, going back to the Georgia game last year, that he's more athletic than Ohio State maybe let him demonstrate. And if he uses that, and if they allow him to use that intelligently, I mean, I think the Houston Texans offense has something brewing. And if their defensive-minded head coach can build this defense into something over the next couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Houston Texans, maybe not this season like we kind of talked about, but in the very near future, they could become a real thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, like I mentioned, I think they have further to go than these three teams, just from a foundational standpoint. But that is not a dismissive comment at all. I like very much what they're putting together over in Houston, and so do Cody Davis and John Hickman. And you gotta love where all that is. I got to see the Houston Texans live in action on Sunday, which is going to lead me to my first my first like of the day, which we're going to get to here in just a moment, because it's not Jimmy Graham, it's Himmy Graham to you, and he proved that to the Houston Texans on Sunday night. So we got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL. All right, y'all, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL here, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Yike and Like time, like we do every Tuesday. I'm going to kick us off with our like today, but as always, we appreciate you so much as making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day, every day. David, look, my like is a little personal for this week, because I got to experience something that was super cool. Look, every time that I've been in the Caesars Superdome here covering the New Orleans Saints, and Jimmy Graham has caught a pass, the dome has erupted. It has gone from sounding like it is half empty to maybe twice as full the moment that he makes a catch. And then what I got to see instead on Sunday night was that he rips off this big 25-yard "I'm bigger than you'll ever be" catch downfield, and then cashes that in for a kind of, I'm going to call it like a little booty bump. What I called on my show, the gluteus Jimmius, put it on him, and ended up catching a touchdown. It was beautifully placed by Jameis Winston on the outside and catching a big touchdown. Watching him fake like he was going to go up and dunk, but not actually dunk, because that's a penalty in today's NFL. But look, it was fun to feel 10 years younger and to be living in 2013 instead of 2023. I had a little bit more hair then, not much. It was great. It was a really cool experience. And it just kind of reminds you of like the joy of sports and what it brings to people, because everyone just collectively loved that moment. It didn't matter if you were a media member, what team you cover, what team you were rooting for in the stands, what team you were on. I even saw some Houston Texans smiling about it. Like, it was just a really cool moment to be able to see Jimmy Graham come back at 36, especially with the recent health scare that he had when we were all in Costa Mesa for those joint practices. So it was really cool to just kind of see him go up there and remind everybody of who Jimmy Graham can be, especially in the red zone and those kind of specifically dialed up situations. So what a cool moment. What a cool moment to get to experience, and how lucky I am to be able to be in those buildings.
No, absolutely. I mean, I remember when I heard Jimmy Graham was going back to New Orleans, I was like, hold up, I didn't know Jimmy Graham was still in the NFL, like was still playing.
Took a whole year off last year.
And then, like you mentioned, like those plays, like I think the only thing that could take me back further would be if Jimmy did a press conference saying that he deserves wide receiver money. Like, that would be the only thing that would take me back further. Old Saints, older Saints fans will get that.
He didn't want the wide receiver money. He just didn't want to be tagged. All right. He just didn't want to be tagged.
I don't blame him. But no, that I mean, it's really good. Right. And the guys and the moments that make you just remember the joy of football, I think those are very important. Pretty much had the last 2 years of that with Taylor Heineke, because that's pretty much all he brings to the field is just the love of football and the joy of football. And I don't mean that in a negative. Like, we love Taylor Heineke in Washington, and I think everybody in the beat, like when we go to Atlanta, we're really looking forward to seeing Taylor Heineke start for the Atlanta Falcons against the Washington Commanders.
Stop it.
Probably what's going to happen. My like is also kind of personal, but just because I like seeing people develop. I like seeing people grow, and I like seeing people overcome adversity, right? And those are some of my favorite stories. And this is a very small sample size, because that's all we have right now for rookies is the preseason training camp. But Washington Commanders second round pick, Juan Martin, Jartavius Martin, if you know him by his
scouting him.
legal name. Yeah. Coming out of Illinois, Swiss Army knife type of defensive back, right? A lot of excitement about him. Went into his first preseason game against Cleveland Browns. Did not look very good, right? He had 2 penalties called on him, blew some coverages, did some things that, you just wouldn't want from a second round pick. Took loads of heat. Like, the Washington Commanders fan base has come alive this season because of the sale of the team, but it's also come alive across the board, right? So when Juan Martin went out there and didn't look great in his first preseason game, fans let him hear it. The funny part of it is they actually went through and liked a whole bunch of tweets, trashed, like just dogging, right? He went through and liked it. And right, it was kind of like, I want to let you know I see these, right? Yeah. And he stood in front of cameras all week between Cleveland and Baltimore, stood in front of cameras all week, answered the questions, you know what I mean? I think everybody on the beat was pretty respectful, acknowledging the story, but also being respectful of the human, I think. And I mean, I had him on my show like 4 times just in that time frame. I didn't even realize I had him on the show so much, but I was talking to this dude so much about this. And then he goes out there against Baltimore, has a really good week, has a really good game. It was a huge interception that honestly that team doesn't win. They don't break Baltimore's streak without that interception. And I told you this off air, Baras, but I told him in the locker room, I was like, look, you're just getting here. We've only known each other for a few weeks now, and you don't really know me. It's like, but I'm super proud of you. You know what I mean? And I wanted to tell him that a young guy overcoming the adversity, not just overcoming it, but using the adversity to fuel the bounce back. And then I asked him, I was like, have you gone back on Twitter yet? And he's like, no. He's like, he's not going to do that. So he used the negativity to fuel his improvement, but it wasn't out of anger. You know what I mean? Like when he came out at the end of it, it wasn't bitter. Exactly. And then he comes back in his 3rd preseason games and he laid some hits on some Bengals, man, that got everybody excited. And now all the people that were hating on him in week 1 preseason are loving him week 3 preseason. And we can't wait to see what he's going to do in the regular season. So love the bounce back from Juan Martin.
Yeah. We love a flip the script. Gotta love that. My yike is really, really simple. Shout out to Juan Martin though. That's so dope. And I really liked scouting him coming out of there. I really wanted, I was like, oh, he's a perfect fit for the Saints. But I mean, let's be real. He's a perfect fit for like any defense because the dude can do anything. My yike is super simple. It's cut down day today. I know we didn't get to focus on it much because the cuts will happen after we've recorded and all these other things. So that'll be more of a Tony and James Wednesday show for you to check out, as well as a Tyler and Alex Thursday show to get you all caught up on all of those in terms of the biggest ones. But yeah, we were just talking about the human element of Juan Martin, right? And the human element of Jimmy Graham and the human experience that comes with sports. And this is maybe the worst part of that human experience is watching a bunch of guys, not necessarily lose their dream, opportunity there, but it run into an obstacle in achieving their dream, right? And then you wait to see if these guys are able to kind of, circumvent that obstacle, land on practice squads, be back next year, all those other things. But nonetheless, this is a day that never gets any easier to cover. And it's certainly not a day for me to cover is like a selfish thing to say, because I'm not the one that takes the brunt of this. It's the players. Right. And to an effect, it's the coaches and the organizations and the staff that have to deliver that news over and over and over and over again. Yeah. It's such a tough time. And so it's a good time to remember to kind of be respectful about this week and these couple of days and what it means for these players and organizations.
Yeah, 100%. The way I put it on my show is it's one of the worst times to do what I'm doing. But then it's even worse for the coaches to do it. And then it's even worse for the players that are experiencing it. When we stack up the levels of suckiness, I'm going to take my selfish view of it, but we're very low on this. And you get to see what these guys do and the work they put in, you know what I mean? And that's kind of the hard part is it's almost easier. And I've unfortunately been in this situation too, where I've seen a guy get cut and I'm kind of like, yeah, bro, you deserve it. Honestly, you know what I mean? That makes it easier, but and I can't speak for the Saints roster, obviously, but for the Commanders roster, none of these guys are getting cut because they didn't put in the effort, because they didn't.
100%.
You know what I mean?
100%.
My yike is going to get out of the realm of reality and into the realm of video games, because Ross, if you're playing Madden, and you're running the Arizona Cardinals organization, and you want to trade for a quarterback within the NFC West, you can do that. But in the real world, teams like the San Francisco 49ers don't like trading former first-round quarterbacks to teams within the division. So my yike is all the people who are roasting the Arizona Cardinals for not trading for Trey Lance. The best way I can put this is the inflation to pay the Niners to get them to trade him within the division especially when you're talking about a situation where you need a starting quarterback for at least the first part of your season. So this isn't you're going to trade for Trey Lance and stash him the way the Dallas Cowboys are going to, because I heard some people criticizing the Niners because like Niners and Dallas, that's a rivalry. It's like, okay, that's a rivalry to me, but I'm 40. That's not a rivalry to a lot of other people. Like there's people in their 20s who are like, what rivalry? What are you talking about? Rivalry, right? That's a rivalry. I'm dating myself literally, but that's a rivalry to me. But then the Cardinals are getting roasted for not trading for Trey Lance within the division. Like John Lynch, if the Cardinals call, I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals called at least, you know what I mean? But like if they called, John Lynch probably just laughed at them in first round picks. You know what I mean? Like here's three first round picks worth of laughs if you want to stay on the phone call. You know what I mean? Because that's the only way I'm doing this, bro. Like,
right.
So I just people have to remember outside the world of video games, it takes two to execute a trade. Sometimes it takes three. Like, let's be real. Sometimes agents come through and they're like, hey guys, if you trade him here, it's not going to go well. You know what I mean? Like we're not gonna go easily.
Hey, we got to get this contract set up and all this extension.
So,
yeah.
So sometimes you need two to dance. Sometimes you need three to dance. And it's not as simple as, well, let me push the X button and submit this trade and make this thing go through. So I just, again, let's remember the reality of cut down day, but let's also remember the reality of this is not a video game.
Yeah. Well, it does indeed take three to dance. That three is David, myself, and you. Thank you for joining us for another dance here on Locked On NFL. We will be back here with you tomorrow. Tony and James bringing you the biggest questions from around the NFL. We appreciate you very much for being here with us for another episode. And to all you everydayers making us your first listen of the day every day. For David Harrison at DHarrison82 on the Soch. I am Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on the Soch. We appreciate you very much for joining us and for making us a part of your day. And we look forward to speaking to you again here soon as another episode of Locked On NFL will be right around the corner here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.